lot of people wondering what would happen next. And adding to this, adding fuel to the fire, I think I can't blame media, but I have to say this. I see some friends from media. Please don't get me wrong when I say this, and don't misquote me and kind of chastise me tomorrow, but I'll have to say this. After the advent of 24/7 electronic media especially, there wasn't a single day in my memory from 2009 to 14 when the issue of Telangana was not debated or not actually was beaten to death. Every aspect, every single aspect with respect to formation of Telangana, would it be a viable state? Would the leadership here have it in them to actually make it a successful state? Would this state actually survive? What would happen to the migrant population? What would happen to Andhras? What would happen to Rayalaseemas? What would happen to the Kannadigas, the Maharashtrians, everybody who's settled here, who's made Hyderabad their home? What would happen to the Hyderabadi cosmopolitan fabric? All these questions were asked. There was even rumors that this would become a hot den for Naxalites. There were even rumors that the feudals would return and Telangana would once again go back to 1950s and 1940s, and it would literally become one of the most backward states in India. These were all the things that were floated, all the theories, all the nonsense that was said about Telangana. Today I stand here proudly, representing the state of Telangana, being a responsible minister in the government, and being a responsible citizen of this state. I want to list out to you all the achievements that this state has accomplished. Like I said, we focused on one basic thing. Good economics is good politics. As long as you create wealth, as long as you make sure that the poorest of the poor in the society are taken care of, as long as you ensure that the wealth that gets distributed equitably, without depriving anybody, without any depravity, I think you would have done your job. Our Honorable Chief Minister, Shri KTR, he's a man who's learned it the hard way in life, that suppression of excellence is something that is done as a matter of routine. He's had to fight his way up all along his life. He's never had anything which kind of helped him politically, meaning, especially in the politics, because you said politicians have thick skin, you also said bureaucrats have thick skin, so I have to kind of refer you, to that comment of yours. Yes, you have to develop a thick skin to survive in this. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, there is a lot of mediocrity that you have to put up with. Unfortunately, whether I like it or not, there are a lot of legacy processes, legacy issues in place which I can't simply negate or overlook or eclipse and say that, I can dispense away with that. You inherit them. These are challenges that you inherit. But end of the day, I think what matters is how well you work. In the case of Telangana, coming back to the challenges of being a young state. In the case of Telangana, when it was formed, the expectation of the people of Telangana was sky high. What happens is, a Chhattisgarh or a Uttarakhand where the people weren't fighting or were wanting a state versus a state of Telangana where people were actually giving up their lives. We had young students immolating themselves, setting themselves up in fire, trying to make a point. We've had a gentleman called Yadi Reddy who traveled all the way to Delhi to commit suicide in front of Parliament. So this was an emotional battle. This was not a simple statehood battle. This was a battle where each and every person, who was fighting for the cause, took it to his heart, her heart, and actually really staked everything to make it happen. So what happens essentially when that is the mood prevalent? The expectations are high. So when we started as a young state, our Chief Minister said, the tagline of the movement for the state was justice in water resources, justice in fund allocation, and justice in employment. Nillu, Nidhulu, Niyamakalu, in Telugu if I have to put it. So this was the fundamental thing that we focused on. Back in 2014, when we started our journey, and most bureaucrats who are seated here, most economists who are seated here, or the journalists seated here would tell you that for any government to start making plans, for any government to start working on something, we're working towards an outcome or a goal, you would need planning, of course, but planning can only happen in the presence or with the backing of good statistics. Mr. Joshi is here. He worked as our Chief Secretary. he would know, he would tell you. Mr. Tiwari is also here. Mr. Mishra is here. Ajay Mishra ji is also here. All of them worked with our Chief Minister very closely, and they would tell you. When the Honorable Chief Minister initially started laying out plans and he started saying planning is important, statistics is important, data is important, so get me accurate information, accurate data. And when we were trying to understand where do I get this data, unfortunately there wasn't much available. You will be surprised when I say this, and I don't want to demean or insult anybody or insult or even cast aspersions on how the governments in the past were run, but the fact is there wasn't enough data to make empirical decisions, make sure that we work towards a specific outcome. But I'll give you examples. So I was the Minister for Rural Water Supply in 2014. I was Minister for Panchayati Raj and Rural Water Supply. So Honorable Chief Minister decided that we will become the first state in India, because he had done this in his constituency, Siddipet, back in late 90s. He had provided a potable drinking water connection to each and every home in his constituency. Almost, I think, about 50,000-60,000 households. And this was late 90s. So he said, if I could do that as a legislator in Siddipet, why can't I do the same thing as a Chief Minister across the state of Telangana? So he wanted me to get the data on the pipes laid in the rural, setting in the villages, number of overhead service reservoirs built, when were they built, which year were they built, the number of pipeline laid, what shape are they in, when were they laid, is there like a map, is there an inventory, etc., etc. So I sat with my team, my engineering department, my engineering chief, and the entire rural water supply department. You would not believe it if I said this. Honestly, they said, sir, the data goes only as back as 1980s. What happened prior to that, we really don't know, because there's no bookkeeping, there's no information, so I can't really give you that information. I'm just giving you this one example of one department where I worked. Even in Hyderabad, and you'd be probably amused and I'd be trolled if I said this, but I'll say it. I've become thick-skinned, like I said. When we started looking at all the data of the Hyderabad Metro Water Supply and Sewerage Board, when were the pipes laid, what should be replaced and what should be strengthened, what should be laid afresh, etc. Unfortunately, again, the data only goes so far. We don't have adequate data. Leave all that aside. Some things are even more interesting. See, back in 1980s, when Sri N.T. Ramarao was the Chief Minister, the then government had launched a program called as Housing for the Weaker Sections. And since then, every successive government following N.T. Ramaraoji's footsteps had also continued the program, had built houses. So we just, for our own understanding in 2014, we looked at the number of houses that were built in the state of Telangana alone between N.T. Ramaraoji's time and KCRG's time. There were a number of chief ministers, number of governments between 83 and 2014, almost 31 years. You'll not believe this. According to the data available with the government back then in 2014, more than 65 lakh houses were built. The total population of the state itself is 3 crores. And 65 lakh houses have already been built. So our Chief Minister asked, then why would there be any new demand? Why are you saying there would be any more new demand at all? If this was all true and if this was all accurate and if the books were kept properly, how is this even right? So just to give you examples. So all of this was the situation when we started our journey in 2014. On top of this, each and every time there is a bifurcation. See, even in a household, a joint family, when there is a split, when there are 2 brothers split, who gets what, who gets to keep what, who gets to have the silverware, who gets to have, the debt, etc., etc. That's always a battle, right? So power, electricity was a huge challenge. I think Mishra ji worked as, the Special Chief Secretary for Power as well, so he would know. Who gets which project? Because, Telangana was predominantly consuming more power because we had 30 lakh plus tube wells, bore wells. So we had electricity dependent agriculture here. So we needed more power. Likewise, who gets the rightful share in water? In Godavari, Krishna. Because, like I said, when the 2 states split, prior to that we had Bachawat Tribunal. We've had other tribunals giving out allocations in river waters. But who gets to keep what in river water? Who gets to keep what in electricity? Who gets to keep what in the joint institutions, including possibly the one we are sitting in. So who gets to keep what and who gets to, take what? I think that was one big challenge that, we had to answer right at the onset. And on top of this, there were a number of promises made by the union government. In the Reorganization Act of the state, there were a number of promises made. There were promises to kickstart and jumpstart rapid industrialization, so therefore promised special incentives to industries and industrial corridors being set up in both states, Andhra and Telangana. There were promises of a steel factory being set up at Bayaram because there was enough iron ore, quality iron ore through Steel Authority of India. There was also a promise to set up a locomotive coach factory in Kajipet. There was a promise to make one of our projects, irrigation projects, a national project. There were several other promises that were also made as part of the State Reorganization Act. So the lack of data, the lack of clarity, the fight that goes on with respect to who gets what in terms of water, in terms of power, in terms of other resources, and more importantly, a very inimical, I'm not even saying a non-cooperative, uncooperative union government, but a very inimical, extremely negative union government, which does not believe in the spirit of federalism. They talk about Team India, cooperative federalism, but it's all lip service. They don't really believe in any of that. They'd want the hegemony of union government to continue. They'd want states to be at their mercy. They'd want to basically dominate you in every which way. That's the attitude. So this is the context of when we started our journey. So what did we do so far in 9 years? What did we accomplish? Since this is economics and since this is Abhay Tripathi Memorial Lecture, and Mr. Tripathi, I've learned, was a man of numbers and who worked on taxation, was brought in a number of reforms in the way the tax department used to work. So let me share with you a few numbers. Back in 2014, when we started our journey, our state's per capita was 1,12,000 rupees. But as of March 31st this year, in 2023, our state has the highest per capita in the country. It's 3,17,000. So starting from 112 to 317.